With Sermon Shot's church-specific AI, sermon highlights don't go unnoticed. Easily transform your sermons into 10-plus bite-sized clips, ready for social media. It doesn't stop there. Refine each clip by adding or removing video sections, give them your unique touch with colors, fonts, design edits, and create the goosebump moment with background music. Elevate your message and reach hearts locally and globally. Start today by going to sermonshots.com. This episode of the Tech Arts Podcast is brought to you by AIforChurchLeaders.com. Harness the power of AI for ministry at AIforChurchLeaders.com.
This is the Tech Arts Podcast, where we talk about tech, leadership, and all things that concern church audio, video, and lighting.
Welcome to the Tech Arts Podcast and the Earthworks Audio Studios. My name is DL. So glad to have you joining us today. Today's episode is part 2 of our conversation with Stephen Arruda on stewardship. In this episode, we're going to answer, how does poor stewardship lead to burnout? Why is budgeting so hard, and how can we make it easier? And how can your personal finance habits shape your decisions for your church? But first, let's pick up with Stephen's answer on capital expenditures and how to plan for them. Let's listen in.
Within a business mindset, if you will, we do run into those seasons where we have to make the same decision as other people that are using micro rentals. We have to think about, well, do we invest into more of this, or we keep sub-renting from a partner of ours? So I have to think: is this a time for us to? How much are we gonna budget in capital expense wise? And for us, we do about 10% of what our expected revenue is going to end up being. We start planning on the usage of that at certain seasons, whether it be Easter or December. So anyway, that's just from, again, the business side. I don't have a ton of experience from the church
Stephen,
side.
let me ask it this way. Capital asset purchase typically means what's going to happen in a year from now, what's going to happen 2 years from now, what's going to happen 3 years from now. So for MikeRentals.com, let's just take the business perspective, because I think it pretty directly applies to churches. What's your 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plan, and how does that relate to stewardship?
Gotcha. So we kind of have this expected growth curve, and it's always nice when we can look back and be like, wow, we destroyed that. But we can get in our minds, get way ahead of ourselves and be like, well, let's let's bump that curve up to what we had, the same growth we did last year. Well, you can't do that. That's kind of unrealistic, and it can be very, very risky. You could have a 2020 right around the corner and you don't even know it. So we basically take about 10% of our from the years, as far as trying to make that projection. We take 10% from our the last year that we did, and we project based upon 50% growth. I know that seems crazy, but that's kind of reality for us. 50% growth, and then take 10% for every one of those growth years. That kind of gives us an idea of the money that's going to be available to put towards capital expenses, which for us, that's 16 channels of Axion or something like that. Our next, for us, our actual next thing, which God willing, is we need another building. We need a new building. We need to move out. We've overgrown the space we're in. Good problems. But it's hard because you're like, well, we need more wireless, but we need to move. So yeah. It's a tricky balance for us. But that's kind of how I had to learn that. By the way, that didn't just come. It took me probably about 5 years to really understand, because Mike Reynolds was a baby in 2015, and we're still crawling in 2016 and 17. We kind of got our legs in 2018, 19, and we grew up in 2020. We realized who we were and who we stood for and what we were built for and from. So now, as we've had some real incredible growth in front of us and the team's grown too, it's a little bit easier to predict, I guess, and see that too. Anything that's beyond that, it's just a great surprise. That's kind of our method, is basically trying to project, it's doing 50% more revenue of specifically in rentals, not related to sales. Those are two different numbers for us. 10% of those in the next years to come, based upon the 50% growth curve. That's kind of what we look at, and we're like, okay, we have X amount of dollars that we're going to have to work with throughout this year. And
right.
Some of those, if we want to cash flow them differently, that's another story. That's where we go to. I guess this would be almost like going to the church asking for, a giving campaign. Is I go to my partners and ask them, hey, who wants to invest more into Mike Reynolds in relation to these capital expenses or these equipment purchases that we have to make, versus going down to a bank, which that's my move after I give that type of offering. But anyway, if that makes sense, that's kind of what we do. It's a very reactive business model, so things change, but you have to at least have, that's what budgets are for, right? So you at least have to have those guidelines so you don't do anything crazy. But then there's that weird or that out of this world project that comes along that it's just like, it's a great opportunity. And it never hurts to just take a little extra time, put things in a spreadsheet, write things down on a whiteboard, and just analyze it and see what the downsides are, what the benefits are, and just take just a little of extra time. I think when we rush into things, we tend to make bad decisions.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. If you're in a church, to kind of relate, what MikeReynolds.com does over to a church, you're kind of looking at a few things. You said, hey, we're outgrowing our building. I think when a church says, hey, we need to grow, we need to build a new building, that's something that you're looking at going, what is my capital asset purchases going to be to help me for that in the future? What's my install going to be for that? I think when you're looking down the road, you want to look at your systems and go, hey, my sound system's 15 years old. That may be my next capital asset purchase. That's what I need to push to the top of the list for the executive team or the leadership team, or if you're in a very small church, for your pastor or whoever's in charge of things, to say, hey, this sound system's 15 years old. It's on the end of its life. We need to be planning for that, or at least have an emergency fund for that amplifier that may go out, or that speaker that may get blown, or so on and so forth. Versus if your lighting system was just put in last year, that's probably something that you want to say is a 5 or a 6 or a 7 year plan down the road. So when you're a small church, kind of think through or look through the lens of what is an emergency need down the road, what is old. Don't necessarily look at it from what just needs to be the latest, greatest technology, but what do I need to plan on down the road? And that would be what kind of initiates your capital budget. A lot of times I tell people, hey, your capital asset budget isn't necessarily money, it's the idea. Hey, we're going to put in a new building. Well, we need to have a sound system, we need to have a lighting system, we need to have cameras in that new building. What's going to come from the old building? What's not going to come from the old building? So it's not necessarily money that you're looking at right away. You're looking at the idea. Hey, this system is 15 years old. We need to put in a new system either next year or the year after. That's the idea, right? And then you go in to figuring out, hey, what's it going to cost? I'm sure it's very similar in the business world where you're setting aside money, but hey, in the middle of the year, we've got to deal with this emergency that we saw it last year, but we're able to make it. Hey, our website, we're able to make it, but we're building a new website, and boom, all of a sudden, that came about because you were somewhat establishing capital asset purchases. We need a new website. We need this new thing because we see a problem coming. So that's kind of how I look at it when it comes to capital asset budgets, is think about the idea of the 1 year down the road, the 2 year down the road. What do we have to fix? We talked about this a little bit in the church tech tip when we talked about rentals versus stewardship, which can help with your capital budgets. If you're thinking you've got to, buy a bunch of stuff, maybe you rent it first to see, how you like it, or if you don't like it, so you're not spending all that money. But people will say to me quite consistently, and I mentioned this in the church tech tip, they just say, hey man, rental's throwing your money away. So expand that answer a little bit from earlier and help our audience understand how rentals can help you avoid some major mistakes.
They do, and because I've seen this on some pretty large scales before, especially when there was like a lack of preparation or a last minute decision. And anyway, so when it comes to renting, you heard about my need earlier. It was just like there's that last minute need. Well, and it made no sense to buy. We were talking about pricing on all that stuff. Goodness, the two shotguns that would have been $2,000. The lenses, they're $1,200 to $13, I don't know, $1,300 then. So you're getting close to $5,000 for, and then where's it going to go and what's it going to do after that? So that it's the usage of something.
You did it for, what'd you say, $500?
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure you got questions like, well, what lens did you use? What microphone did you use, right?
Yeah, it's funny. The guys are my staff that was with me. I had to lean on them for the lens suggestion. I kind of can make fake my way through a photography conversation, but I told them what I liked. I was like, hey, I like it when the person's like really good in focus, but the backgrounds is like, oh, you're. Oh, see, I already forgot the terminology. Your focal depth or whatever it is. So I got the knowledge from them, and so they advised me. See, I went to them, even though they're younger. Then that doesn't matter. It's like they completely had more experience with this stuff, and so they told me what I needed to get. And of course, I already knew. I was like, I'm getting 416 shotguns. Those are like the standard, and the interface that we need. So yeah, there was an interface. I needed a recording interface too. So there was all that, put together to produce. You would look at it and you'd be like, wow, I was super impressed when it was all done. It looked so pro. But
it informed future decisions. Like you guys did a small rental and you said the staff looked at the videos and was like, oh, this is amazing. They probably came back and said, oh, you used this lens, you used this microphone. And so now when they went to build their budget, operation, need, want, capital, they said, maybe we need this lens so we're not renting it all the time. It kind of informed the budget decision. And that's what I love about MikeReynolds.com is how it can inform the budget decision so that people make good decisions on what they're buying.
I mentioned QuireFlex earlier. That's one of the bigger items that we know we're dealing with guys that are trying to get that on a capital expense radar, right? Especially, we introduced these to Metro Media Ministers group that meets in different locations every year. But we had it, just happened to have had it with us in Memphis when we were at Bellevue. And I remember Alex came up to me and was like, hey, is that the real thing? I was like, yeah, man, did you want to just try it? So it's one less thing I'm lugging home. And it wasn't just him noticing a difference. It was leadership and congregation noticing a difference, and I get a text be like, hey man, I'm a believer. I was like, that's great.
Yeah. Sound is so subjective. And when somebody can actually hear the difference, now they decide this is worth the money.
Yeah. And especially when you have choirs week in, week out, or you do the traditional versus and the contemporary service model, a church in town here, Asbury, that's Preston Pickapank. And he's got to go from contemporary to traditional. And so they do the contemporary stuff, and they got to strike the band for the next service. And then, so now they all of a sudden have an orchestra and a choir. So he uses the Choir Flex in another way. He upgraded to what's called a Mic Flex processor, and allows him to do processing both on an orchestra and a choir. And he's told me multiple times that people have come up to him, and just people he doesn't know, probably the people that normally say, "Hey, it's too loud," or something like that. He gets compliments based upon adding that in. And for his frequency of doing choirs and orchestras, it's completely made sense. Versus, just because obviously he'd be renting it every weekend, made no sense whatsoever. But there was that discovery. He used it as a discovery period. To make sure it was something, first of all, does it do what everything I told him it did and everything I've witnessed it do? Of course it did. But then he knew if it did that he could justify this, and he couldn't pull the trigger on it right away. And we understood that. I was like, yeah, no worries. But hey, when you go to do it, we're going to actually give you your rental money back towards the purchase. So as part of that, again, it's just part of that discovery cycle. We think it's fair. We think it's really fair, and it's worked out really well. So when a lot of people are using Choir Flex to see if it's going to be a permanent solution, even if it's from months ago, we know it takes a time for those capital expenses to get put into certain budget years, and we're happy to do it. Just happy to do it.
I think that's a great point that you're making there on capital expenses. I tell people all the time, they get so frustrated when they're like, oh, I want to buy it right now. I just rented it. I tested it. It looks good. Sounds good. I want to buy it right now. It doesn't work that way with churches. It doesn't work that way with businesses. They are at least a year out. And then they have to see it. They have to understand it. Unless it's an emergency or we got to fix it right now, patience when it comes to big capital purchases or when it comes to big purchases is key, because odds are it's February or March or April. You looked at it, you feel it's the right thing, but they've already made a plan for the year on what they're going to buy. And they're remaking that plan around October, November. And it may not get into the plan depending on whether it's an emergency or not. So it may even push like a second year out, but it almost always is at least, 8 to 9 to 12 months before that capital expense comes in. So being able to rent it and being able to see what it sounds like and kind of prove the concept, I think is a pretty awesome deal for everyone. But let me switch subjects on you here. Hours and burnout. So with churches, this is always a hot topic. But stewardship, the word stewardship never really comes into that topic. It's always like, well, work less and, what's going on in your personal life. They always kind of talk about that. But hours and burnout, how do you steward your time, and why is that important?
It's funny. It kind of goes back to like time budgeting. That you don't hear that. You're like, what? Well, I mean, I would challenge this has happened to me at several times in several periods of my life. Even back when I had no employees with Mike Reynolds, I would log my time for a week straight and find out exactly what I was doing at what exact times. And then then there was another phase, like when I got like busy and it was still just me. I'm like, oh, darn it, I got to get a quote out. I got to send this PO out to get that ordered. Then I got to do a rental fulfillment. I got to run it. And so I actually created this task cycle, I guess, if you will. So I would do an invoice. Then I would do something related to fulfillment. Then I would do something related to ordering. Then I would do something related to paying a bill. And I would just kind of go around and around all day. But create a log of your time for a straight week. See where your time is at. And it's amazing that, in accounting, there's this thing that people say, like, or you've heard this say, numbers don't lie. Well, that's going to tell you exactly, okay, why are you in the bathroom for 30 minutes? Or how long have you been sitting at your desk on your phone, just doing nothing. Geez, do you need an hour and a half lunch? There's that stuff. When I was at camp, I did this with one of my guys, and I was like, hey, we're not getting anything done faster by coming in at 9:00 when everybody else is here, and there's like all this, water cooler talk and all that stuff. I was like, let's just come in at 7 and get like 2 hours. No one's bothering us and get crap done. And man, that made us so much more efficient. We went home a little earlier than everybody else too. They're like, where are you going? It's like, hey, we've been there at 7. We get here at 7 every dang day. It's just there's those seasons where it's like, we need to be more efficient. I can't come in at 9 where everybody else is coming in at 9. Everybody's trying to talk to you. It's all of a sudden everybody has their emergencies as soon as they walk in. So yeah. I do, for the people listening, there's a book I have right here. I really recommend this book. This is Time Management Magic by Lee Cockrell. This I read. I love it. It says how to get more done every day and move from surviving to thriving. It puts things into perspective, especially like your health. Yeah, you want to be efficient, but at the same time, you don't need to be killing yourself, at work. So the stewarding your time, I would ask myself, like, if Andrew walked in and I was doing what I'm doing right now, what would he say? Because we all looked up to Andrew. He was our guy, right? And there was one time, as funny, I thought I was doing what I needed to be doing, and he was like, hey man, we don't need to be doing that right now. You can do that next week. And I was like, okay. Just sometimes we think we're doing the right thing at the right time, and sometimes it's not, and it can wait. And I get it. I have to manage that. Every single day. Whether that's something I can that can be put off to tomorrow, whether that should be getting done right now. But going back to what I started with is creating that time log that holds you, and then kind of creating a schedule based upon the time log, correcting the things that are wrong or loose, and then just stay accountable to it. And then you do it enough, like anything you practice, it becomes habit. So stewarding that time it's again valuable, being productive and being efficient, and then you end up kind of becoming irreplaceable along those lines until you duplicate that, which I did, into somebody else who can take your place, so you can move on to the next thing that God wants you to do. And for me, that was Mike Reynolds.
I think you hit it perfectly there. Doing a log of what you do. If you're a manager and you're trying to figure out, why your team is burned out, why they're working all the time, have them do a log of everything that they're doing during the week and submit that to you. And trust me, they won't want to do it, but you're going to look at that log and you're going to go, wait, just like Andrew did, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? Like, it'll really give you a picture of what your team is doing and what each individual is doing. And then for yourself, like Stephen said, do that log. And as you grow yourself, you can say, hey, these 4 things, I can have a volunteer do that, on another volunteer do that on the weekend, free those 4 things up to give me more room down the road. And just like with money budgeting, operation, want, need, emergency. When you're looking at that list that you've made, what is my operation? Hey, I've got to be there every day at 7 o'clock to make sure that these things work, or 9 o'clock, whatever it is. That's kind of your operational time. What are your wants? I really want to get this done, but my boss may not need it. It's not a need, right? But I really want to do this. What's the needs? You've got to be hitting that. And then what's the emergencies? And I think this is important. If you schedule yourself, hey, I come in at 9 o'clock and I leave at 5 o'clock, and I have myself scheduled all through the entire day, you're going to be in trouble, because that's not how life works. At 9:35, somebody comes in with an emergency that takes you away for an hour to fix this, that, or the other thing, and all of a sudden you're behind schedule and you're starting to go into burnout and you're working till 6 or 7 to kind of make it up. So the emergency piece of that, would you call it log, when you're logging your hours, the emergency piece is important to allow yourself, I don't know what the right word is, whether it's grace or whether it's the ability to stretch a little bit.
Kind of.
Bandwidth, yeah. Like give yourself some time in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, that just gives you a little bit of fluff, Maybe you get there at 9 a.m., but you don't start on what you're going to start on until 9:30. So if you get going at 9:10, you've now bought yourself 20 minutes of bandwidth. That's a great word, bandwidth. But I think operation, want, need, emergency, everything that you do with money applies to your time as well. And if you don't, you're going to burn out. You're going to find yourself looking around going, why am I so tired? I think another thing, Stephen, and I'll let you talk to about this a little bit too, is it was what you do in your off time. I remember working with a volunteer employee that they were a volunteer, and then they progressed to become an employee at the church. And they came in and they said, "Man, I'm just so tired." And I said, "Well, tell me about what you did last night." And they're like, "Oh, I stayed up till midnight playing video games, and I watched a movie till 2 a.m. and then, I'm back in." I'm like, "Well, you're not tired because of work. You're tired because of how you stewarded your off time." Talk a little bit about that with employees and how that's important and maybe what you should do to steward that correctly.
That's good, because keep in mind, I've been married for 18 years this coming September. I have 6 kids, ages 12, 11, 9, 6, and 4. So my heart's cut in pieces, so is my time. and not to mention...
I want to say congratulations, but I'm just tired, just hearing all of that.
Last night, just even yesterday evening was a great example. You have different kids going through different phases. One boy out of 5 girls, having some tough times with doing schoolwork, and his sister's giving them tough time about something, and then another one of the girls that they're going through that coming of age phase, and wanting their own phone and all this other stuff. And holy mackerel, by the time we got everybody to bed, I was just like, usually my wife and I will watch a movie or something, or part of a movie. We never can watch a movie in a full swing. It's just like, we're done. But just last night, I usually have that bandwidth to talk. I was done. I was done, just between talking about life lessons and corrections and all that stuff. And keep in mind, I also have a team of 7 individuals that I love dearly, because of them, I have that time back, that if this was all me, I wouldn't have that time with my wife and my kids. They would hate me. And honestly, my marriage would probably be in ruins. All for the sake of what? Saving whatever all their salaries is together so we could live the way we wanted, but then also I'll probably end up having a heart attack too on top of that. That's worthless and pointless. And so having them here, we homeschool too, and then some days, that's usually all on my wife, but there's some days I need to play a little bit of role as a principal, if you know what I'm saying. Well,
you have 6 kids, so technically you are a school. You're not just homeschooled. You are a school.
I know, but that's, and to just be available as well. Not the temptation to bring work home on the weekends is there. Sometimes it happens, but I communicate that with my wife. There's when it's happening or if it's going to happen, versus I'm just going to slide into some work while I'm at home. No, if I tell her, like, sweetheart, there's something just bugging me, I got to figure out what's driving me mad, and I can't do nothing but not think about it. I need this amount of time to do this or whatever. Or before we started this, I told you how I had my 12-year-old daughter helping me do asset inventory audits. So I actually got her involved, and we're just sitting at the kitchen table on Saturday and just kind of made a game out of it. Just, you have that serial number? Okay, I got that serial number, and just kind of making a game out of it, involving them. I'll try to involve them in work as much as I can. I'll take them with me to events or something like that. But the time, because and when they're at those ages where they're remembering whether dad's there or not. Early on, when I was starting this, it was way tougher, but they were also way younger. And I'll ask them about certain things that they remember, and they'll remember coming to work with me and playing on certain things, but they don't remember me at the time, like coming home late or them going to bed soon, because below 6 and younger, those memories don't stick. But like now, that's why I'm so thankful for this team. And I have to allocate time for them too, because all of them have individual needs. I mean, we just applied healthcare for the first time as a company. I feel like that's a big, huge milestone for us. And so now I'm like the HR guy. So, having to talk about all their individual needs. Eventually, we'll have our own person that's over HR related things. But right now, that's the way we are. I have to manage that stuff. But I want to take care of them. I want to make sure like they're not, money's not a distraction for them, that those needs are being met there. Their health is being cared for and taken care of. So in that regards to what we just did, we just saved them money and they got better care for what they were paying for before. So that was two birds in one stone. So like being a steward, as being the head of this company, I'm accountable to partners, and there's another chunk of time too. I have to give them time every Friday to be held accountable for how I'm behaving as a leader, how I'm leading this company in the direction it's going. And when it all comes down to it, I could do whatever I want, but I have them as partners, as they're my counsel. They've raked me over the coals for not managing cash well and not managing debt well and all that stuff. So
a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, burnout has only to do with work. And I think what you're saying there is, and I think it's kind of cool how you are able to involve your kids in work. And so you're spending time with them, but at the same time, you're getting work done. But, a lot of people will make the mistake again. They'll think, hey, I'm burnt out because I'm working too much. When the reality is, it may be a hard season at work, but you're not compensating for that at home. You're not taking the time to rest. You're not taking the time to recharge the battery so that when you go back into work, you're ready for it. And now if the season at work is always nonstop, I mean, that's a different discussion. You want to talk it through, and maybe you need to switch jobs or change roles or look at your log again, redo your log and say, hey, here's some things that are really weighing me down. But the example I used with the staff member who went home, played video games and movies and everything, got to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning and then was back at it the next day. I think it was 8 or 9 whenever they came back into work. And they said, I'm tired. I'm feeling burnt out. I'm feeling like there's a problem here. I was like, yeah, because you just didn't get enough sleep. And I know when I've got a tough season and I've got to work till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, but I got to be back into work at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. I know when I get home, I have to really compress my schedule at home and get myself in bed with enough time to get 7 or 8 or even 6 hours sleep so that I'm ready for the next day. Now, I don't want to live my life like that permanently, but I think the point here is a lot of people miss that being burnt out and having problems at work is sometimes tied to what's going on at home. And if you're a manager, this is or a boss or somebody who manages people or a leader of people, this is something you've got to keep in mind too. When you see somebody heading down the road of burnout and their skills are starting to diminish, and maybe they're your front of house audio engineer and they're just missing cues and there's some issues, a good question to ask is, what's going on at home? what is happening at home, especially if you look at their schedule and you say, okay, this was a normal, 35, 40-hour week, but yet we're making some mistakes that we don't normally make. What's going on at home? I think that's something that is worth diving into if you're a manager and a boss. But speaking about home and the work relationship, personal financial stewardship, how does that translate, how you run your personal finances? How does that translate to stewardship at the church?
These are great questions, man. Because I've dealt with the temptations to the things that I'm not getting in my personal life, and I've seen that people actually take action on this, where they're like, well, and that's where we're talking about that wish list thing. It's some of those desires for like me to get this gear are coming out of actually a really selfish, dark place to things I don't have that I want to have my own studio at home. Well, I might as well just spend the church's money and build one there and try to justify it. That is very dangerous. That's extremely dangerous. And sadly, I've had to deal with that. Early on, when I was starting Mike Reynolds, I had to make money somehow. So I was doing a lot of mixing, a lot of installs. I was wiring homes, but then I was also selling equipment for other people. Like, so if you had a closet full of gear, I could help you sell it, and then I would just get a commission from selling it basically on eBay. But I handled all the logistics and all that other things, and it stunk to find out that money I was sending, what I thought I was sending back to the church, was actually going to an individual's PayPal account. And sadly, I found out what actually that got uncovered, because obviously they're trying to audit me. I was like, well, here's full transparency. Here's the schedule of how things sold and where the payments went and all that stuff. And then didn't hear anything, and it come to find out somebody was using that to buy their own gear to outfit a studio like at home. And just like usually when there's that's why some jobs, not necessarily churches, but some jobs will actually look into your credit score and all this other stuff too, because there's certain habits that follow that low credit score or anything like that, or a credit report, and they're a little bit more leery to hire somebody that might do something out of desperation. And that's the word right there. It's like if things aren't in line at home, some bad practices are going to translate in bad stewardship, are going to translate into the work environment.
I would take it one step further too. I would say, how you live your life at home financially, you should live it that way at work, at church. And here's what I mean by that. I've seen this so many times where somebody at church, they're managing a team and they're like, let's take everybody out to lunch every single week. Would you do that in your personal life? Would you go out to eat every single week, or would you buy, the EX version of whatever it is? I've seen it so many times where at home, they wouldn't buy the EX version. They wouldn't buy the upgraded version. But at church, they're like, yeah, let's get it. Let's get the upgraded version. So I kind of take what you're saying a step further and say, hey, how you live yourself at home when you live on a budget, how you live within, a budget financially at home, apply those same principles at church. Now, there's some circumstances where obviously, it's different. But if you're holding yourself accountable to, should I buy this? Would I buy it if this was my personal finances? If I was personally having to buy it, would I buy this? I think sometimes that can help guide you with making purchases on the church side of things. What do you think of that?
That's pretty good. You made me think of a couple instances, because I mentioned I used to do a lot of home-related stuff, so I did a lot of home theater type stuff, and it was crazy. So many people thought I was like, man, your setup must be incredible. I was like, it's actually not. It's like, I have kids. So that went out the window a long time ago when somebody just went down to my receiver and started jacking with it. I was like, okay, that's gone. It was, I had to like trim back that stuff. So like I'm in a lot of senses, sometimes when I'm doing, in 2020, I had to go back to doing a lot of this stuff just to alleviate any financial pressure on trying to pull too much money out of the mic rentals till so that could stay and be paid. Employees could keep getting paid. I went and wired houses and did more home theater stuff. And like a lot of times, because everybody that year was upgrading their homes, right? But a lot of times I was just like, I would be in the middle of these conversations with a husband and a wife, and holy cow, they're thinking two different things. The husband's just like, yeah, go. I want this, big that. And the wife is just like, you're doing what in what room? And so there's that. I was always getting that balance, and then having to come up with a kind of a compromise between the two, but then also giving them options. That's something that I ask for, is like, I try, like at home, especially if I don't know or trust the contractor, I'm definitely going to get a second quote or even a third on a fence, because I don't know anybody who does fences, or gutters, because I don't know anybody who does gutters, but I know a solid electrician, solid plumber, solid HVAC guy. Those guys I'm always going to go to, because they've always given me a fair price or a discount or whatever. Service has always been great, and they don't creep my wife out. So you go, think about that when it comes to, be it integrators or even even a rental company, is just do your due diligence, and get pricing and quotes on this, on this stuff. So you kind of can make a smart decision because I would do that at home, but why would I not do that for my church? And so obviously when I was out at Adair, very limited on my choices out in the middle of the country, but had to get creative, and that's, thank God for, the internet. So for that stuff, I had to get creative. It has to balance my time on driving back and forth. If I didn't need to do that, that was one less thing to spend money on and do. My time, you value your time. Your time is and translates to money. Somewhere it translates to money. And especially when I was by myself, we were talking about that, just being the, steward of all that. I wasn't paying myself until like 3 years in. And so I had to act as if I was getting the salary that I eventually wanted. I just had to wait 6 years for that to be what it should have been. So you are right that a lot of things at home do and can mirror into either your job, be that for a company or be that for if you're wasteful at home, you're going to be wasteful in your job. It just, like I said, I've seen it. I've seen other people get let go because of that. And it stinks when they're like, when the CFO would come through and go through all of a department's like financial stuff, and then the next day people aren't there, and it's because there was just waste. The person wasn't a bad person in regards to like they weren't malicious. They just they got lazy and didn't stay on top of. That's the thing, is like, you want to get your rest so you can stay sharp, you can stay on top of this stuff, because as soon as it'll run away from you really, really fast if you're not careful. So it's diligence and stewardship is just staying on top of these things. Like like I said, I have 6 kids, but I also have to allocate time for my home financial stuff and conversations with my wife. She does the home budget. I fund the home. However, there's like bigger picture stuff like vacations and all that stuff. And we're constantly, we haven't gone to Disney World yet. I was like, there's no way I'm taking 6 kids to Disney World, and planes and all that stuff. I was like, but they would get the same amount of enjoyment and time standing in less lines and being on more rides just by going to Silver Dollar City, which is only 3.5 hours away.
Those personal decisions translate to work and how you spend money at work. If you're, treating your personal finances very similar to your work finances. But you said something in there that I thought was key, and that is transparency. You said, talk to people, talk to others and say, hey, should we get this? Is this something that we should do? You mentioned Andrew Stone kind of coming in and going, is this needed? Is this wanted? Oh yeah, it's for this special production. We definitely need to get it. I think transparency with leadership, helping them understand the reason behind the financial purchases and what you need is a big deal. When you're transparent with your wife, as far as your budget is concerned, as far as what you're spending at home, sometimes the decision to purchase a bigger item comes out of that versus you just going and buying the item and there not being an understanding of why it was bought. So I think transparency is a big deal when it comes to financial stewardship, when it comes to burnout, when it comes to all of these things that we've been talking about. So let me ask you this, Stephen. So last question here. There's a lot of risks with poor financial stewardship. We've kind of covered a few of those. But you're somebody who's saying, hey, I struggle a little bit with my finances personally, which, by the way, doesn't mean you're going to be bad at finances at work. It just means you may need to watch a little bit closer. But what are some of the things with financial stewardship that can help mitigate a mistake or a risk that may be out there? And you're probably going to be coming from a business perspective, but think business and church. What are some things you can do to kind of mitigate those financial stewardship issues that may pop up?
I had something written down here and it might back up just a second, but I thought it was great when I got it. It says about transparency and financial stewardship. It says those who are willing to be transparent are worthy to be trusted, and that's stuck out because I've always
say that one more time. Say that one more time.
Those who are willing to be transparent are worthy to be trusted.
Those that are willing to be transparent are worthy to be trusted.
To be trusted.
It's an awesome statement.
And I felt like I've heard that before. Maybe I've told it to myself. And there's some vulnerability and risk that come with transparency. But I saw Andrew do it, and I saw him hold an integrator to transparency once before. It's like, whoa, you asked to see their margin? Well, first of all, who the heck would ever show you that? Well, they did. And they got the job because they laid all their cards out on the table. Here's what we're making here. Andrew was then allowed to see, okay, great guys, we're going to get some of our own staff involved to help install this stuff to offset the labor costs. Because those were real. All those numbers were real. Bringing people from out of state and all that stuff, that's not cheap. Contractors and all that stuff, but we had a very well capable team they brought me in, and I don't know how many dang XLR, Cat 5 terminations and coax crimping, that triax, but it would have cost 5 to 10 times that, bringing somebody in to do all that work. We had the team and we had the time. We had those two things. Anyway, so I saw him do that, and they got project after project after project from COTM because they were transparent in their pricing. It's a risk, and it makes people scared when they do it. I don't mind it at all. If anybody ever asks for it, it's oh yeah, heck yeah, here's what we do here, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever. Because again, we've earned a lot of people's trust because we're transparent. Even when things are going wrong, we're transparent. We'll tell you if it's because we did something stupid, or whether or not, even when it's FedEx's fault, we'll feel bad still. It's our fault. Man, if we only got it out a day earlier, we probably would have missed that winter storm.
You're transparent with the client. You let them know what's going on. But you said something there too about Andrew. Ask tough questions. Ask the tough question. I think that will help you with transparency as well. Why did this go wrong? What could we have done better? Why am I over budget? Ask those tough questions. I think that'll help you be transparent as well.
It'll weed out. Let's say if you lead a conversation with that, it'll weed out a lot of people. Do you really want the relationship with us? Are you willing to jump through these hurdles for that relationship? Or are you just trying to get another kind of notch on the belt, another project, and all that stuff? And what was great is that they chose wisely, because then they that specific company got a lot of referrals because of Andrew. A lot of people listened to him. So yeah, it was great. I was proud of them for doing that too. The risks associated with poor financial stewardship and how they can be mitigated. Okay, this goes to it just as like simple as accountability and not doing stuff that necessarily planning things without another person's involvement or input. If I feel like when people try to do take these things head on all by themselves, I feel like that's where the problems occur. Even when, for instance, my spouse not be involved in like the Mike Reynolds financial related stuff, or I have another LLC that I do like I mentioned, the home theater stuff and whatnot under. And there's been a couple of times where I'm like, man, I'm trying to manage my credit card debt on that side of things, but she knows nothing about that because she doesn't see it. That she doesn't see any of that stuff. It's just different, separate accounting and all that stuff. But it'll weigh on me without like telling her about, especially if something's a problem, because it'll eventually be a problem. If something's burdening my thoughts, she's my best friend. She'll know. She'll know. And so there's been a couple of times where I just had to tell her, I was like, I'm just trying to get this credit card under control. It's like a flipping boat anchor. And of course, being an awesome wife that she is, she's like, have you prayed about it? I'm like, no. So that's of course immediately the first thing we do. And as soon as I surrender that, it's crazy, because God's awesome and faithful, that a solution or another opportunity comes that again helps with that. But that's a practice. I have to continually keep her in the loop on certain things that are going to affect my thinking, affect my mind. Like so on the micro side too, she's aware of especially the burdens, because I carry those, and she graciously reminds me that I don't need to be carrying them like where they're weighing my spirit down. But I have like in with Mike Reynolds, I have two other partners, and we meet every week through the holidays. It gets really tough, but we meet every week, and we have like there's things I used to hate talking about, especially when it came to like, hey, here's our debt picture. Like, do we have to look at that? It's like I don't want to look at it. But what was awesome is that's because I didn't like looking at it, our debt snapshot before, because I didn't have a plan to eliminate the debt. And now that we do, or to gradually shrink it, and now I like looking at it because it's like down 5% from last month. Yes. It's like, can we lead with the debt snapshot really quick? That type of stuff. But you have to have other people. You have to be open to. Again, you're not walking around talking to everybody like, hey, just find the valued, the input, the people, the trusted, the people that have influence in your life, that their opinion actually matters. Ask, those people for opinions, not like every Joe or in this case, like every employee. I don't talk to any of them about this, but those two guys, one has a very successful company. another one, or gosh, a couple of companies. So does the other one, and he's got his MBA. So he's the one who trained me how to do accounting, And so again, just having those people to talk to about, financial picture, financial goals, because I mentioned before, those first 5 years, I didn't know how to really set a budget. I wasn't sure how to do that. Kind of glad we did, because it's allowed us to get through seasons where, like January, we're just super reactive. We don't know what's really going to happen because it's a reactive business model. It is what it is. But thankfully we still keep getting the traffic that we get. But the mitigation is for sure accountability would be number one. It can't just be about you. For crying out loud, we're at a church. Before you sit down, pray over your financial stuff. Pray over your budget. Pray for the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding. Pray for God to show you, reveal the things you can't see or you don't see just on numbers in a spreadsheet. Give you the wisdom for what's, the want list, the wish list, the emergencies and all that stuff. Give you that wisdom. Maybe even that, gosh, it's God, for crying out loud, that foreknowledge of some of this stuff. You'd be so thankful to look back and be like, man, I am so glad I had a budget line for this in preparation for a worst case scenario or whatever. It's, again, that happens at home with emergency funding and other types of stuff. My wife and I really dove into setting up accounts for the kids and all this other stuff. Just not stop operating out of one bank account. Like, that's a whole nother topic.
But it goes to a plan. It goes to having a plan for how you deal with debt. It goes to accountability, having people that you trust, that you can talk to. Have a plan to mitigate those financial issues. Have a plan to institute stewardship with your finances. Have a plan for your schedule. Have a plan to help you avoid burnout. Have a plan. That's what it comes down to when it comes to stewardship. Stephen, thanks for coming on today. Hey, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that? What's your Instagram handle?
Yeah, mine is Stephen Arruda. So that's Stephen T. Arruda. That's my personal, and then you can always go to Mike Rentals on Instagram, MICRENTALS.
Stephen, thanks for coming on today and talking with us about stewardship.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure and an honor to do so.
Well, that wraps things up for today's episode. I can't wait to talk to you on the next Tech Arts podcast. Until then, I'm David Leuschner, signing off by wishing you a great day and praying God blesses every moment of your week. See you soon.
You have been listening to the Tech Arts Podcast, presented by Digital Great Commission Ministries. DGCM is a 501c3 nonprofit that was started to help churches with all things technical. Whether you need help building a team, finding the right gear, or just a better understanding of the church tech world, DGCM is here for you. Find out more about our free on-site visits, reports, and consulting by going to audiovideolighting.com. Digital Great Commission Ministries will help you run your church service like a pro. Find out more at audiovideolighting.com.
This episode of the Tech Arts Podcast is brought to you by AIforChurchLeaders.com. Harness the power of AI for ministry at AIforChurchLeaders.com. With Sermon Shot's church-specific AI, sermon highlights don't go unnoticed. Easily transform your sermons into 10-plus bite-sized clips, ready for social media. It doesn't stop there. Refine each clip by adding or removing video sections, give them your unique touch with colors, fonts, design edits, and create the goosebump moment with background music. Elevate your message and reach hearts locally and globally. Start today by going to sermonshots.com. From sold-out stadiums to intimate live performance venues, sound engineers agree on one thing for the best digital mixing consoles for live sound. The only name that matters is Digico. As the recognized worldwide standard for live audio mixing, Digico consoles are renowned for their industry-leading sound quality and ease of use. Whether your application is in a church, broadcast, theater, corporate, sports, or installed sound, Digico offers compact and affordable products. From the S21 all the way up to the pioneering power of the Quantum 852, Digico delivers the workflow, the feature set, and the absolute reliability that the world's biggest tours and programs have come to rely upon. If you're looking for a sound console, look to Digico for your answer. For more information on Digico, go to digico.biz. That's digico.biz. From front of house to center stage, for over 25 years, Earthworks microphones have sculpted the sounds of your favorite concerts, venues, and performances. Earthworks Audio is a sponsor of the Tech Arts Podcast. We are so happy to have them on board and excited to promote the new Earthworks SR117 vocal mic and capsules. To find out more about Earthworks Audio or to get your hands on this mic, go to earthworksaudio.com. That's earthworksaudio.com. Capturing emotion with sound. earthworksaudio.com. This episode of the Tech Arts Podcast is brought to you by ProLights. For more information, go to aclighting.com.